toilet against an outside wall, the curved pipe under every sink, the small vertical pipe on your roof. None of it was built for your comfort. It was designed to keep a gas from killing you in your bedroom. The gas didn't exist. The thing it was meant to stop killed millions. The cure worked anyway. If you lived in London around 1840, the toilet was a piece of pottery kept under your bed. There was a colloquial name for it in provincial England, a goes under, because it went under the bed. In a house with any help at all, a maid would empty it, swill it out, and put it back 4 times a day. In a house without help, you carried it down the stairs yourself in the dark, walked it to the privy in the yard, and tried not to spill. That was the comfortable version. For the working classes of central London, the situation was worse. There was often no yard. There was no bedroom with a spare piece of furniture for a chamber pot. There was a basement and a ground floor, and a family of 8 or 10 living in 2 rooms. The privy, if there was one, sat at the end of a court shared by 30 or 40 people. And below the floor, dug into the London clay, was a pit. The cesspool, a hole in the ground, sometimes 6 feet deep, that the whole court shared. The cesspool was rarely emptied properly. It was pumped down when it got too full, the overflow running into the street, into the gutter, into the Thames. The smell of it crept up through the floorboards. In summer, it was unbearable. In winter, it was merely constant. The smell, contemporaries agreed, was unlike anything a modern nose recognizes. Sewage in a sealed pit in summer, baking through clay, gave off something close to ammonia and something worse underneath. The nightmen worked with handkerchiefs over their faces. The families on the upper floors complained of headaches. A man called a nightman did this work. He came after dark because the carts stank, and the neighbors complained. He worked with wooden buckets. He earned extra money for it. He fell into the pits. He contracted the diseases he was paid to clear away. The work killed young men, and they were paid little to die. By 1849, the smell and the death had been happening together for decades. Nobody had connected them properly. An official inquiry was convened to look, finally, at the conditions in which the working class actually lived. What it found was not a mystery. It was a description of a city pumping its own waste back into its own water. The inquiry recorded a piece of testimony about one London house, one court, one shared drain. The witness described it plainly. Almost every house contains a cesspool, emptied occasionally by the lodgers, who throw the contents by pailfuls into the court. A large cesspool is said to be in the center of the court, with an open drain and no trap to it. The water the people drink comes within 1 yard of the cesspool. The water closets are full, having a drain to carry off the overflowing into the above-mentioned cesspool. 1 yard. The drinking water of the family sat 1 yard from an open pit of human waste. There were about 30 people in this court. That summer, cholera came back to London. What cholera looked like, for those who got it, was not a gentle decline. It began with cramps and watery diarrhea. Within hours, the body was pouring out everything it had. The skin went gray and blue. The pulse thinned to almost nothing. Most who died did so within a day. The neighbors would find them in the morning, collapsed on the floor between the bed and the privy door, or already gone. The doctors who came to the working class courts had nothing to offer. No treatment. They could write the death certificate. They could ask where the patient had drunk. The answers, again and again, were the same pump, the same well, the same shared standpipe at the end of the lane. By the end of the summer, cholera had killed roughly 14,000 Londoners in 3 months. The deaths were not evenly spread. In Rotherhithe, across the river, the working class district was being emptied. In Hampstead, the wealthy north, life went on as normal. The same disease, the same city, the same nights. One district was dying at 25 times the rate of the other. The danger was real. The streets were genuinely sick. Something was passing from the cesspool to the family, but no one, not the parish doctors, not the sanitary inspectors, not the lawyers writing the official reports, could say what. The smell was unbearable. The assumption was obvious. The smell must be the thing. Edwin Chadwick was a lawyer, not a doctor, and in 1842, he produced the most consequential public health report of the 19th century. It argued, calmly and at length, that epidemic disease was caused by atmospheric impurities, the products of rotting matter, and that these impurities reached the body through the breath. Disease was in the air. Smell was its messenger. Get rid of the smell, and you got rid of the disease. It sounds primitive now. It was taken seriously for 50 years after. The plumbing industry that grew up around this idea is, in a sense, the architecture of a panic. It treated the house as a vessel to be sealed against an invading gas. Bathrooms were pushed to outside walls, so the soil pipe could vent straight up the outside of the building rather than through the bedrooms. Baths and sinks were tucked into half landings, under the stairs, anywhere they could be hidden. The toilet was installed against a wall with a window or a flue, anything to keep the perceived poison away from where people slept. At the heart of the system sat a small device, the water trap. The first recognizable version was patented in 1775 by Alexander Cumming, a Scottish watchmaker working in London. He called it an S-trap. It held a small pool of water in the bend of the pipe, and the theory was that this water would block the rising air from the sewer. The sewer gas, as it was now called, could not pass the water seal. Thomas Crapper did not invent this. He improved it. Crapper, working out of a showroom on King's Road in the 1880s, refined the S into the U-bend, the same curved pipe you have under your sink tonight, and popularized the modern bathroom as a furnished room. Crapper held 9 patents. None of them were for the flush toilet itself. The persistent myth that he invented the loo began with a satirical biography in 1969. He did, however, plumb Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and Westminster Abbey, and his shop window was the first bathroom showroom in the world. What matters here is not who invented what. What matters is what the device was for. The trap was a soldier on a wall. Its enemy was a gas. Its purpose was to keep that gas away from sleeping people. By the 1880s, engineers had realized that the water seals could be siphoned dry by pressure changes inside the drain stack. A sudden rush of water elsewhere in the system could pull the seal out of the trap like a straw. The solution was to vent the stack to the open air above the roof. That odd small pipe you see on top of old houses, the one that looks like a chimney for a dollhouse, exists because engineers feared the seal might fail and wanted an escape route for the gas. Not into the bedroom, but into the sky. The architecture of the miasma was complete. The Victorian house had been rebuilt as a fortress against an invisible enemy. There was a doctor in London who thought all of this was wrong. John Snow had argued in 1849 that cholera was water-borne, passed by drinking, not by breathing. He spent the next 5 years being ignored. In late August 1854, cholera broke out in the parish of Soho. Within days, hundreds of residents were dying. Snow went door to door. He made a map. He marked every death with a dot. The pump on Broad Street stood at the center of a neighborhood that should have been healthy. The houses around it were well built, lived in by working families and a few boarders. There was nothing obviously wrong with the air. There was nothing obviously wrong with the food. The only thing the dead had in common, Snow kept finding, was the water. He went to the local board of guardians and asked them to remove the Broad Street pump handle. They did. Among the dead Snow traced back to that pump was a woman who had never set foot in Soho. Susanna Ely was a widow in Hampstead, miles to the north. She had liked the taste of Broad Street water. She had it delivered to her door in bottles every day. She drank it and died. Snow published his findings at his own expense in 1849. The Lancet and the broader medical establishment rejected his water-borne theory. The editor, Thomas Wackley, was among his most outspoken critics. The medical establishment did not abandon the miasma theory for another 30 years. Then, in the summer of 1858, the Thames itself staged a demonstration. The river, by then an open sewer carrying the waste of 2 million people, had been baking for weeks in a heatwave. The smell reached the Palace of Westminster. Parliament tried to debate. They soaked the curtains in lime. They kept the windows open and voted through them. The smell did not relent. The politicians, suddenly afraid of an atmospheric impurity of their own, voted through a plan that had been on the table for years. Joseph Bazalgette would build a new sewer system for London. Hundreds of miles of new tunnel, threading beneath the city, carrying the waste out to the estuary. He sent it downstream. The Thames, upstream of his outfalls, ran clearer. What nobody noticed at the time was that the London water companies were quietly moving their intake pipes upstream as well. Not because they believed snow, because the clearer water upstream looked and tasted better. Lambeth moved its pumps upriver, beyond the tidal reach. Southwark and Vauxhall did not. In the 1849 epidemic, Lambeth's customers had died of cholera at roughly 1/10 the rate of Southwark's. The new intake pattern, designed for taste, locked that difference in for decades. By the 1880s, the miasma theory was losing ground. Robert Koch isolated the cholera bacterium in 1883. Germ theory was winning the medical argument. And yet the plumbing did not change. The traps were still in. The vent pipes were still on the roofs. The bathrooms were still against outside walls. The wrong theory had built the right house. In July 1881, an American president, James Garfield, was shot in a Washington railway station. He lingered for 11 weeks. While he lingered, the master plumbers of New York held a press conference. They did not blame the bullet for his slow recovery. They blamed the sewer gas in the White House plumbing. They offered to refit the executive mansion for free. Garfield's successor, Chester Arthur, refused to move in. He told Congress, on the record, that the White House was behind the standard of the better class of New York tenement house. The Senate voted $300,000 to demolish the building and rebuild it, plumbing first. The House refused. The compromise was a plumbing overhaul. Garfield died a few weeks later in New Jersey, far from his own bedroom. This is what miasma theory looked like at the end of its run. A sitting president being told his bedroom was poisoned by his toilet. The plumbers were not crackpots. They were the establishment. The country was not embarrassed. They were in earnest. Now to the irony. The trap under your sink was designed to block a gas. Its pedigree goes back to Cumming's water seal and forward through Crapper's U-bend, refined across a century. The gas it was meant to block was hydrogen sulfide, the rotten egg smell of sewage, sometimes mixed with methane. At very high concentrations, hydrogen sulfide can kill a person in minutes. At household concentrations, the levels that actually reached bedrooms in any well-built house, it stank. It did not transmit cholera. It did not transmit typhoid. It did not transmit any of the diseases the Victorians feared. What the trap actually did was something nobody planned. It separated the soil pipe from the water service. The soil pipe carried waste out. The water pipe carried clean water in. Before the sealed system, the two often met. Cesspools leaked into wells. Drains ran near pumps. Drinking water sat a yard from the open pit. Once the trap sealed the drain and the vent pipe equalized the pressure, that meeting became impossible in any properly plumbed house. That separation is what stopped cholera. Not the trap against the gas, the trap against the germs. The water seal kept out the smell and, without anyone intending it, kept the bacteria away from the kitchen, the cistern, the glass on the side table. Chadwick, the lawyer whose report had launched the entire panic, lived until 1890. He attended a Society of Arts discussion that year on a paper by Sir Robert Rawlinson on the disposal of sewage. He proposed on the record that cities build ventilation shafts the size of the Eiffel Tower to bring fresh air down into the streets. He never accepted germ theory. The man whose wrong idea saved millions died still believing in it. In one sense, His longevity is the measure of how long a wrong theory can stay useful. The sewers Bazalgette built on the miasma premise carried waste away from houses. That consequence, intended or not, broke the cholera chain long before the chain was understood. The trap did not know why it worked. The plumbers who fitted it did not know why it worked. The doctors who prescribed it did not know why it worked. But the water in London stopped killing children, and the reason was a piece of curved pipe under the sink. Look at the pipe next time you are at the basin. Look at the small stack on a rooftop as you walk down a street of old houses. They are not comforts. They are the residue of a fear that turned out to be about the wrong thing. The Victorians were afraid of sewer gas because they believed the smell was the disease. They built their homes to keep that smell out. The smell was not the disease, but the home they built kept the disease out anyway. The trap that was meant to block an invisible gas ended up separating waste from water. The separation, not the seal, is what broke the chain. And the chain, broken, is why you do not die of cholera at your kitchen sink. A wrong theory produced the right house. You live in a building designed against an imaginary enemy. The real enemy never got in. Next time you wash your hands, look at the curve of the pipe beneath the basin. It was not designed for what it is doing. Subscribe to the Origin Portal for more origin stories that turned out stranger than anyone expected.